Hi, my name is Kebra Smith. I'm a registered nurse. I'm the co-director of the Connecticut Coalition to Regulate Marijuana, the president of Connecticut United for Reform and Equity, and the CEO and founder of Canna Health, which is a health and wellness center focused on cannabis in Hartford, New Haven, and Milford. We're here today. Well, I first want to welcome you to our End Prohibition Lobby Day. We are here with representatives, stakeholders in our communities throughout the state, from law enforcement, from clergy, from elected officials to advocates and people who just want to be a part of this industry. We know and it's been proven that taxing and regulating cannabis creates economic growth and millions in taxes, that Connecticut would be left behind if we are the only state in the New England region to not legalize cannabis and we become an island between, all of these other states that are moving forward. Regulation keeps cannabis away from schools, that public education will address any concerns about public health concerns that come with legalization, that prohibition makes control impossible, like there is no control over what is not regulated. And regulation would improve the fairness of the criminal justice system, which is something that we really need to look at in the state of Connecticut. Also, cannabis is much safer than alcohol, and that we should really be looking at moving forward this year. So we have a lot of speakers today. I'm not going to take up a lot of time, but our first is my favorite, my mayor from the city of New Haven, Mayor Tony Harp.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm New Haven Mayor Tony Harp, and I'm pleased by this chance to weigh in on the measurable benefits of legalized recreational marijuana possession and use. First, let's be honest about the health risks associated with marijuana use. The nicotine loaded into perfectly legal cigarettes and the alcohol and beer and wine and distilled spirits are more likely to cause illness and addiction than marijuana. Next, let's be honest about where the policy on this issue is trending. The gradual decriminalization of marijuana has already been in process for years. The medical use of marijuana is already legal here in Connecticut. In the past 9 years, since 2012, 10 states and Canada have legalized the recreational use of marijuana by adults. As I understand it, none of these jurisdictions is working to repeal these laws. Perhaps that's because they're at last able to generate sorely needed revenue from behavior that's been widespread and kept underground for decades. Washington State has had some $434 million in cannabis tax revenue last year. Colorado is said to have counted some $250 million just last year. In Connecticut, I think a cannabis tax would quickly help address what has been inconsistent revenue, and I think it would soon make a notable difference in our state. And finally, let's be honest about who has suffered the most over time at the hands of harsh marijuana possession laws. The answer is this: the residents of Connecticut cities, many of whom are men and women of color. Statistics show that despite similar rates of marijuana use, African Americans are still arrested at a far higher rate than white suspects for cannabis-related charges. As of 2010, African Americans were 12% of the population in Connecticut, but accounted for more than 30% of marijuana possession arrests. As I understand it, 2 bills to address the legal recreational use of marijuana would at last address this long-standing injustice. One would erase past convictions for possession of up to 1.5 ounces of cannabis. Another would allow for those most harmed by marijuana prohibition to have a head start applying for licenses to legally sell marijuana. In my view, the time to extend the trend toward legal use of marijuana is now. I applaud the General Assembly for considering the issue. I encourage members to support legislation to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mayor Harp. Cities like New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport would benefit from tax revenue from cannabis legalization, and they would actually have community investment efforts directly going back to those communities most harmed by the war on drugs. Another very important element of legalization is equity, and so to talk to us about that is State Representative from Hartford, Windsor, and Bloomfield, and the chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, Brandon McGee.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Brandon McGee, not only am I the chair of the Housing Committee, I serve as the chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. And I'd love to give just a couple shout outs, one to Kebra Smith and Jason Ortiz, and all of the advocates that have continued this discussion on the idea of legalizing cannabis in the state of Connecticut. I got to tell you, as the leader of a very robust caucus here at the General Assembly, we've had the honor of going on the road, hosting a dozen town halls to engage our communities on the issue or the discussion of legalization of cannabis. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I'm hearing, and it stands out, two things. One, that if this legislature passes any policy that addresses the legalization of cannabis, we want to be a part of the conversation, and we want equity to be a part of that as well. And so on behalf of the entire Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, where we are still discussing the legalization of cannabis, a few things that I'd like to indicate and that we are committed to implementing, and that is a variety of programs to actively engage people from communities who are and have been disproportionately impacted, and to ensure their inclusion in the legal cannabis industry. They are reducing barriers to entry in the commercial adult use cannabis industry, providing more mentoring and professional and technical services for individuals and businesses facing systemic barriers, promoting sustainable, socially and economically reparative practices in the cannabis industry, and lastly, providing business assets that include organizational skills, grants, and other finances towards endeavors in geographical locations, again, areas most impacted by this, designated as a disproportionately impacted area that will have a positive impact on the members of that particular community. And I'll end on this note. I have a few more remarks, but we have a ton of folks to speak, and I know you want to hear them. But I want to talk a little bit about youth prevention. Youth prevention is extremely important to me, and I'm sure to the advocates that are in this room today. This will also have to be a part of the conversation side by side as the legislature considers recreational legalization issues for adults only. And I want to remind everyone that recreational use of marijuana or cannabis will be prohibited for people under 21 years of age, at least in our book. So we are delighted that Kebra, Jason, and all the folks in this room have continued to engage the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus on this extremely important issue, and I look forward to remaining a part of that conversation. Thank you so much.